I think it's going in. All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome once again to the Dev Roundtable. It is I, Dice, and today I am accompanied by, and I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Crawly, developing a survivor themed deck builder game. It's on Steam right now, and it's featured in the Steam Game Festival, so you can check it out. Yeah, thanks.
Awesome. And who else is here?
You might need to check again because our audio is apparently not going through.
Oh, that's fantastic. So let me fix that again.
I wasn't going to say
Well,
anything
well,
until.
well, but according to OBS, it is going through. It just might be a little low. Can you check again for me?
I couldn't hear it at all.
Strange. It's going through OBS. Ladies and gentlemen, we're having technical difficulties.
It's like
Yeah, I
very
don't hear
low.
anything.
It's very low.
Okay, what about now? You got,
Hello, hello,
yeah, you guys have to talk.
hello.
There's a bit of a delay, so it'll take a sec.
Yep. We can fix all of this in post, so don't worry, boys. Oh, wait, it's live. We can't.
Okay, it should be decent. Yeah, it's good. There's like a good delay, so it like took a sec for me to hear
Yeah,
it.
yeah. All right, so let's try that again. Let's do take 2 right here live. So as I
Just cut
said,
that out of the recording.
yeah, let's just cut that out of the recording. So again, welcome once again to the Dev Roundtable. Today I'm accompanied by Crawly and Eric, and I'll allow them to introduce themselves a second time in the case of Crawly. Go ahead.
Hello, I'm Crawly. I'm developing a survivor themed deck builder dungeon crawler game. It's featured in Steam Festival right now. So, and there is a demo available during the festival, so you can check it out. So yeah, I'm waiting to hear your opinions. Thank you.
Awesome. Awesome. And we'll be checking that out a little bit more in depth in a moment. But before we do that, Eric, why don't you introduce yourself?
Of course. My name is Eric. I am a freelance artist and also a musician. I do a lot of cartoon kind of concept art. I do art for games. I do art for channel arts and stuff like. I do pretty much any art that works within my style. And musically, I am a doom metal / drone metal uh, guitarist and vocalist. I also just write and compose full music, and I'm in a band.
Awesome.
That's a pretty long resume there. So, as you guys know, we've changed the format a little bit. We are still reviewing tweets and footage and Kickstarters and stuff if you send it to us. And you can send that to us by joining the Discord, which is in the comment section below and the description, hopefully. Join us, and go into the Dev Roundtable channel and just post whatever it is you want us to look at, and we will look at it the following edition. But today we're going to try to be talking about the overarching theme of game design. In particular, what is your design process? And we're also going to extend this in general to the arts as well. It's more of a design look rather than our technical skills. Something I've noticed is that, at least in my case, and a lot of people I interact with, we are kind of specialized with a technical ability, be it programming, be it drawing, be it modeling, be it, animation, etc., etc. And sometimes these same people are also making games from scratch, and they're doing it, the whole process. And I think something that tends to be overlooked and not talked too much about is game design. And we brought Crawly on here today, uh, not just to talk about his experience with the Steam Festival, but to kind of talk a little bit about the evolution of his game. And, he made a very, some would even say, controversial decision to change the artistic direction, which also changed a little bit of the overworld gameplay of his game. a while back. I think it was about 6 months ago or something like that, which really changed the look of your game completely. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that. But before we get into that, Crawly, let's start talking a little bit about the. I'm going to pull up your game and have the Steam in the background while you talk. But meanwhile, tell us a little bit about how was this experience for you? You did the Steam Festival. What is the Steam Festival exactly? Talk a little bit about that. Get the listeners up to speed.
Right. So what is Steam Festival? Steam Festival is a place basically. It's something that is provided by Steam to for the developers to provide demos for the upcoming games, so that players can basically browse through them and play demos and see if they like something and they want to like wishlist follow the game. And the games need to be coming out in like very near future, like I think it's like 4 or 5 months or something. So yeah, you can just go through the demos and see if you like something and follow the game. So yeah, it's basically like a digital like game convention kind of thing.
Yeah.
Um, since there aren't many of those being
Held right
done,
now, yeah.
yeah, held at the moment because of the situation.
Mm-hmm.
It's pretty cool. And it runs for a week. And also, yeah, to add to that, developers can also live stream their games, and you have a chance to meet with the developers and ask them questions, and see the gameplay, of course. It's a nice um,
Opportunity.
conversation, basically. Yeah, opportunity, basically.
Yeah, and we're watching again your trailer video right now on screen as you talk. So tell us a little bit about leading up to this, because I'm going to break the rules a little bit and talk a little bit about the behind the scenes stuff that I know. You originally wanted to participate in another festival before this one,
Yeah,
and you kind of decided against it. I think the rules in Steam is that you can only do once. You can only do it once, right? Um,
yeah, you can participate in a festival. I mean, if you participate in one, you can't participate in the next two or three of them with the same game.
yeah,
Um, so you need to choose one.
wisely.
It needs to be near your release date as well.
Yeah. So, and speaking of which, what are you gunning for release date wise for this game?
Um, I actually set it for April, but there might be a delay, of course, because delays happen all the time, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I was participating in the previous one, but I felt I checked like which ones I can participate, and I was also eligible for the February one. So I decided I could polish up the game a little bit more, so that it will be better. Um, and it'll be. I think it's more logical to join one that's more near your release date, anyways. So yeah, I chose to join this one instead.
Awesome. So, okay, tell us a little bit about before, because I want to get into some design questions and kind of the big elephant in the room, which was the big graphical overhaul and the change in certain elements of the game that moved it a little bit away from almost a turn-based kind of grid-styled, uh, almost board game I'd call it. It was in the past, into something a little bit different, something a little bit more real time, a little bit more uh, I guess even horror friendly, which has always been one of the main components of your game. But before we get into that, tell us a little bit about the experience. You had 2 live streams. How was that? You know, how was the turnout? Did you enjoy it? Is this something, that you would like to do again in the future with some other game? What are the things that you wish you could have done better? Just tell us walk us through it a little bit. Because again, in this event, for those who still are a little unfamiliar with it, you get to kind of present your game at a time that you seem to be the only one streaming. Uh, and there was this big schedule, and I kind of went looked through it a little bit, and found you at I think it was 11 GMT, 11 my time last night, and the day before
Yeah.
that it was a little earlier. It was during the day. So tell us a little bit about that experience, because it really does feel like you have a spotlight that's being put on you. You're in the biggest digital distribution platform in the world, and you're just presenting it to people. So how was the turnout? What was the kind of response that you were able to get? What things did you think you did well? What things do you think you could have done better? Tell us a little bit about the actual meat and potatoes, because again, it's not just the demos available; it's you being kind of a part of this expo.
Yeah. First, let me talk about maybe the art change, art style,
Let-
and
Let's
game
let's let's get into that one
function.
after. Let's get into that one
Oh, okay.
after. Yeah.
So, Steam Festival, yeah, it is a huge opportunity. Like, if you're releasing a game on PC, and of course, um, releasing on Steam, which I think you should, um, just definitely join one of the festivals. It's a huge exposure, and I got like, um, I feel like quantitatively want to measure it, like the wish list for the game, for example, like quadrupled. So it's yeah, pretty good in a lot of ways. Like the feedback you get, um, and you can hear me, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, yeah,
So
just
okay, so you quadruple a wish list. That's an interesting number. I'm assuming that's not just because of the people who joined the live stream, but also because of the kind of being spotlit
yeah.
in the whole thing. How many people watched the live stream that you're aware of?
Well, the situation with the live streams are a bit weird. Actually, a lot of the developers kind of set up like constant streams for their games. So they have like constant like 300, 400 more people watching the game and stuff. But I couldn't really prepare for that. I couldn't prepare like a dedicated computer for that. But like overall, I feel like the streams that I didn't really affect. Before I did the live streams, I kind of did them a bit late as well into the festival.
Hmm.
Um, but I started getting the wish lists before that already. So yeah, I think if you can like set up a constant live stream, it would definitely help. But like the 2 live streams, you generally can designate like 2 time frames for your live streams, and during those, I got like the first one I kind of screwed up a little bit. So there wasn't a lot of people. I screwed up the setup a little bit so that I wasn't on the main page, or there was some sort of a problem with it. But with the second one, I got like 160, 200 people, and of course, the time frame you select is very important.
So just to put
Mm,
that back into numbers, so 160 to 200 people in the second one. How much in the first one?
First one was like 100 people in the beginning, and it kind of reduced after that. Right, it was like
Yeah,
100 people peak.
okay, so I'd like to take a moment on that because like you're kind of putting it like, oh, it's not that much, it's not a big deal, whatever. Others did a little bit better. I think it's a very interesting number because and I think Eric can kind of step in this and talk about it as well. But I think like a new streamer in any platform would kill for those numbers. So getting like
Yeah.
without preparing anything and just as part of this festival at very uncomfortable times on Friday and Saturday, uh, I think that's like a killer number to keep in mind. So, yeah, I don't think that's anything to scoff at. We certainly have never gotten 160 viewers here.
And yeah, I'm saying it kind of relatively too. Like if you can select like a good time frame, you can get like easily 300,
Yeah.
400, because it's basically putting you in the front page of the festival. You know,
So
like
I'm a bit
if
curious
you
now.
are,
Does this have like a cost? Because it seems to me that
it doesn't know.
so that's crazy to me, and it's something that I think a lot of I wouldn't be surprised if that changes in the future, but something I think a lot of developers we should take advantage of as quick as possible because for no cost at all, you get spotlit on the main page, you get
Yes.
dedicated live streams with in the case of Crawly, anywhere between 100 to 200 people without necessarily like preparing big live stream stuff or even having that big of a social media following. That's like a very impressive kind of number to be throwing out there and some very crazy exposure for no cost. So I think that's really huge, and I'm just really curious on how do you like apply to this and they select you, or is it kind of like anybody who wants it pretty much can get it nowadays? That probably will be changing, but at least in your experience.
Yeah, it seems like I mean they are wording it like they're selecting, but I'm not sure. I think they're just taking everybody in. It says like opt-in, and you opt in, and then you can provide some information about yourself in the opt-in page. But I feel like it's not that big of a deal. You can just um, join in with your game, and yeah, it is a huge opportunity. And yeah, even if you don't stream during your selected hours, like you stream outside of um, the times you designated, you still get a lot of views.
Yeah, I can
So yeah,
imagine because you're still on the front page, and whenever they click on your game, the live
yeah,
stream's right there. So
yeah, exactly.
I also
You
think so. Do these developers? Because I've noticed that there are certain games that I go in and there's like a live stream, but I notice it's looping. It's kind of like it's not really live. Do like these? Is it like these developers? They set up like computers and they just have this. It's live streaming a recording, or is that an option nowadays that you can put in like a live stream to loop or something?
sorry, I'm sorry. Can you repeat the first
So
part?
yeah, I noticed that there's certain games that I enter right now, and this is independent of the festival, right? But I think it's a related question. There's certain games I go in and I see that it's live streaming because you always see it like on the top above the like basic information of the game. But I notice it's like a loop because I've seen that exact same live stream before. Is that
Yeah,
developers have like dedicated computers just streaming a recording, or is there
yeah.
now an option on your Steam page to put like an archive or a live stream or something?
I think you can set up something. Yeah, I don't remember what it was, like Stream IO or something like that. You can set up something like that to like multi-stream, I guess, but I don't know if it's related to that. But I think they do set up like a dedicated thing. Of course, you need to like stream from somewhere. I don't know like how they set up it exactly.
Yeah.
Just guess they just run a computer all the time.
Okay.
Um, stream.
Okay. Yeah. That was just a kind of a curiosity. So, Okay, so that's again really interesting. The festival seems like a crazy opportunity. I know that when my time comes, I'll certainly do my best to opt in, assuming that the conditions are the same as they are now. But now that we've kind of gotten to this point where, again, we've talked about this game in the past, we've talked about this game. I think it was in the offline sessions before the Dev Roundtable was really kind of officially a thing. We've talked about your game, we've looked at it, and it's changed quite a bit from, then to now. So the obvious thing is the art, of course, but it's not just the art really that has changed. It's quite a bit of the game. The core is still there, and what the game is about is still there, but the art has certainly changed. And I remember having conversations with you about it. Take us a little bit through. First off, why did you change the artistic direction, and why did you change the overworld and the exploration as much? Because it used to be like a grid where you would walk in and you might find like a question mark and something might happen and all that, and you might get like a dialogue panel or whatever. Now it looks quite different to that. And again, you can play the demo, ladies and gentlemen. Just click it in the description down below. It's in the same page. It's in the Steam page, obviously. Wishlist it, and you can play the demo. So take us a little bit through that, Crawly. Why did you change the artistic direction, and why did you change some of the exploration stuff?
Yeah. So, how can I summarize this? Well, basically, how I wanted to design the game, I wanted to create sort of a prototype at first, then let people play the game. And I used the Discord server for that mostly. And after the feedback, I was planning to move in a certain direction that seemed the most logical. Then I created an alpha version, and people played it, got feedback. Then there was the problem of the game having basically, I guess, two different directions, kind of conflicting, and those were like, namely like the pixel art style, like very low resolution, kind of cute pixel art characters. And there was also the survivaler theme going on, which is the main aim of the game. So I basically needed to decide which direction I'm gonna go, and of course that would result in like eliminating one part. Of course, the reason for the pixel art was that I'm not really a good artist, and I couldn't really create high resolution art. So yeah, I decided to eliminate that and kind of go for more like old school survivaler kind of vibe. And I was really a fan of like the puppet combo games that are basically coming out, which has this like VHS kind of look to them. So I decided to go with that and basically change the art direction towards that. And that was like 2 months, 3 months of work to do it. But I feel like the game definitely has more consistent art, because like the card art was like completely different from the characters at that time, and now it's more consistent with each other.
More in line.
That was more in line with each other. So yeah, that was mainly the reason. And about the gameplay changes, actually the um, like main gameplay didn't change that much. You again move through a randomly generated dungeon in a tile by tile manner. It's like the classical roguelikes. It is still like that. I just changed the perspective to again go for the survivaler um, team, basically.
Well, I mean, to be fair, yeah, while the gameplay itself is relatively similar, things like, for example, in the exploration, now you kind of are using, let me rewind a little bit just so people can see what I'm talking about. Um, it used to be this kind of square by square, one move equals one square immediately, and it's all black, and you're kind of discovering it as you go. And now you're using kind of this more almost 3D motion kind of thing, and now these squares are kind of gone. You do still have these spaces. It still is squared from a programming point of view, probably. You probably still generate it in a tiled perspective from a programming point of view because you probably didn't overhaul the whole design process. But as I'm looking at right now, for example, what I have paused, you don't have this like I move into a surprise kind of thing anymore. It's all you kind of see where you're going. I can see lights back here that are kind of indicating a path that I haven't necessarily traveled that I want to go to. There's some obvious doors here. There's still dark area, but it does feel uh, it did feel more like a board game maybe in the past, and I keep using that comparison, which is probably not the best. Maybe something more like a NES style game in the sense of you're moving your entire character from one square to another. Here you have a little bit more of a. It almost feels like you have a little bit more uh, of a chance to avoid things, even if you still can't, which I'm unsure of because I haven't played the latest demo. Uh, it at least feels that way by the perspective. So I think it's more than just a perspective change. Do you feel that's fair to say, or
Yeah, there were a lot of there were changes to how um, the exploration works, I guess. I There was a poll that we've done. Um,
the Discord one, or the one
yeah,
on Twitter?
Discord poll
Hmm.
that we've done to decide the general direction we're gonna take, and of course, there was the round table at
Yep.
that time. It was very helpful as well for me to decide how to go about things. And yeah, it is still tile-based movement, and you can enable a setting in the options that shows the tiles to if you can't really if you feel like playing that way. But by default they are hidden to basically
Ah, I see.
make it feel more like like can I say, maybe like more atmospheric, because the lines like designating the tiles um, would make it feel like more like a board game, as you said.
Yeah.
So yeah, you can play it both ways, like whichever you um, you like.
So we've
Actually,
touched a little bit on. Sorry to cut you off. We've touched a little bit on your design process, which obviously has some feedback from your potential consumers, from your potential buyers, which is obviously the smart way of doing things. But let's go a little bit more in depth as to how do you design when you're not thinking. Of course, you get your feedback, you get your, you put out your demo, people play it, you do that. But what do you do? Like, do you just sit down? Do you write it all down? Do you just make something that only you play and test that out and say, I don't like this or I don't like that? What is your design process, I guess I'm asking? And maybe this is kind of going, maybe with Darkest Dungeon, it's kind of late into development for a lot of these kind of initial steps. But assume that you were starting another game tomorrow based on what you've learned from Darkest Dungeon and your whole experience. How do you design a game? Do you just mock something up that's in your head real quick? Do you write it down? Do you simulate it some other way? Like in the case of a card game, do you like create physical elements in the real world and kind of play it a little bit to feel how the card game feels? Like what exactly do you do?
Um, Good question. Um, to be honest, I don't really write it down or apply it in the physically. Um, but I do tend to just replay and go more like iteratively, change things up, um, and kind of decide what feels the best. Um, so yeah, but by general, like I want to think like what can I um, add to maybe like remix some of the elements from you know like something I've thought of before or something in another game that maybe remix into the formula, and then apply them and just see if they work. And after that, it just pushing to the alpha version to
So it's fair to say that you're more of a practical guy. You don't necessarily
yeah,
plan out every little detail. You'd rather kind of make something playable, and then even if it's really small, and then kind of build on that over and over. Kind of it's the iterative software approach, the classical iterative software approach. You've kind of taken that and you've put it into your design process. So you like to kind of go through it. And and right now, say I'm making Darkest Dungeon, I'm just gonna make the combat. I'm just gonna make combat and nothing else, and I'm just gonna
yeah,
make 3 cards and if I like that, okay, let's add more cards. Okay, let's link it out into some kind of exploration. What does that look like? You kind of go a little bit with the flow. Is that fair to say?
yeah, fair, of course. I generally, there, like for example, in the game there are like weapon types, and for example, if I'm like implementing a new weapon type, um, like from the like previous experience and like um, feedback that I get, I have a general idea of like what type of a weapon that I want to implement, and then like um, I do plan actually the like individual cards um, in like a spreadsheet format to determine the costs and stuff, so that it is like relatively like consistent and like not everywhere
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of course.
completely overpowered or unfun and stuff. And then of course the iterative process begins, and I just show them into the game, and you know
So
um,
I actually want to bring Eric into this a little bit. I'm going to ask one more question, and then we can kind of apply it to Eric's artistic process as well, because Crawly hasn't been here in a while, and we've kind of monopolized the show. Just talking to Crawly, and Eric has been sitting here, kind of just listening. Um,
It's all good. I
uh,
like listening.
So I guess Crawley, another interesting thing about Darkest Dungeon is that there's a lot of different mechanics in it. I mean, you have kind of this almost I'm not gonna say visual novel, but kind of like dialogue based kind of event system where you kind of read what's going on and you select an option and some kind of outcome happens. You have the actual procedurally generated dungeons that kind of have, even if they're procedurally generated, each level has some consistency obviously to it, and the overall story of what's going on in this world. Um, Leaving a little bit more the purely game mechanic stuff, that is kind of what we were talking about a little bit up until this point. things like, for example, the story, the events, the dialogue, the overall structure of what each level is going to look like. What did you do? What was your process to kind of come up with all of this? Because again, there's story writing here. There's a lot of things there's a theme that you're trying to transmit clearly to the player. How did you come up with all of this? How did you kind of think about all this? Because this, I don't know if you can apply the same approach as you did necessarily mechanically, because the iterative approach in writing, I'm unsure. I don't know. I don't know if it would work in this exactly the same way. I don't actually know. So I'm interested in hearing your thoughts, and that I think is a good segue as well into, so be on doc, Eric, into things like songwriting and webcomic planning and stuff like that. So the summation of this question is the story and theme of your game and all of the forms it is expressed in it. How'd you come up with that?
So first things first, I wanna fix something you said. Darkest Dungeon too many times. I wish I made Darkest Dungeon.
Jesus
But
Christ. I've been saying Darkest Dungeon. It's obvious I'm
yeah,
tired. Sorry about that. Yeah, I keep saying Darkest
yeah,
I think it's just like
Draft of
the way the
Darkness.
combat is like lined up the way it
Well, to be
is.
fair, half of the name of his game is
yeah.
Darkness, so it's not that they both. It even has two D's in it, so it's. In my defense, if I abbreviate both games, it's the exact same abbreviation, DDDD, which is
Yeah.
D&D as well, which is Dungeons and Dragons. So now it's like there's too many D's for me to keep track of. I get confused easy. So yeah, not Darkest Dungeon. Please don't sue me, creators of Darkest Dungeon or Crawly. No, it's Draft of Darkness. So whenever I say Darkest Dungeon, just replace it. I'm tired and I don't do good with the words clearly. So I'm sorry. Go ahead, Crawly.
Okay, thanks. So yeah, the story, I basically had a general idea of making the story unravel between um, different runs of the game. So you have this like roguelike game and you play it, and then you can get like one of the few outcomes, and then of course that happens depending on the decisions you make, and then you can try again with different decisions. And for example, you can also unlock some stuff, some characters in the story. Then the next time you play on the next run, they will be affecting the general story as well. So that was my like the general idea, and I got it from like various games that I've played before. The story-based games, I kind of wanted to apply that to the roguelike format. And after that idea, of course, I did like I don't know, I'm not like very knowledgeable in writing as well, but I did create drafts for the different like notes in the game, and you know like made my family and friends read them and stuff, and there was like a little iterative process in there, and then
Yeah, of course you rework on the story, but I guess
yeah,
that's it's obviously that, yeah, that's part of the iterative process too. But I guess what I'm more interested in is, again, you have clearly an overall theme. There's an overall story. Something is going on here, and there's a reason why you're there. There's a reason why you can't remember much of
yeah,
anything. Characters interact with you in certain ways for a reason. Something is going on in this world. So there's some implicit lore. There's some implicit, you know,
yeah.
things that are going on. How'd you come up with all of that? Did you sit down and write it? Was it kind of slowly through, for example, the dialogue options that you described? Or did it kind of come to life through those small segments? Or did you kind of have an idea of where you wanted the story to quote unquote begin and end from the beginning? Like how'd you get into into that whole part of it? Because again, it seems that you're similar to me. You like to design mechanics first, or at least that's where you like to kind of start through. which is something I'm personally trying to balance out and change a little bit, and we'll talk about me in a while. Um, but how did you go into this completely more subjective, and I'd argue maybe even more difficult part of it, which is designing this what's going on here? Because if it's not interesting, if it's not something that I care about, people aren't going to really go like, "Ah, I don't really care." But even when I played it, you know, before its graphical overhaul, I was interested. I wanted to know the answers, and it combines quite well with the whole metagame aspect of it. The whole, it's a roguelike. You're playing it over and over and over again. You're seeing different things this time than you did last time. You're piecing together the story. It's almost this Dark Souls style of storytelling where you kind of get bits and pieces. But even if the player gets bits and pieces, you surely have kind of the overall thing. You can write it down in 5, 10 pages or whatever, and I can read it like a story if I wanted to, because you know what's going on. How did you come up with all that? Is there just a lot of it? Because maybe another fair thing is that maybe there's a lot of it that is just kind of intentionally left vague in the sense that you don't even know, which is some of the best art writers in history have done things like that, like Tolkien with the Blue Wizards. So, how did you go through that process as somebody who I think is fair to say doesn't have a background in writing? I think you're like me, or just a software engineer. How did you go through that process? Because a lot of people I've talked to have a lot of trouble with this, and they tend to use this limitation to go through and make something like, I'm just going to make a sandbox. I'm going to make this, I'm going to make that. And in the end, you can never avoid the writing aspect of it because you have to make your world interesting unless you're making like a straight up card game. So, or a board game or something like that. So, how did you kind of do this? Did you just sit down and do it? Did it kind of come as development went along, and you slowly let it kind of as its own living story build itself? How did you how'd you do it? Tell us your secrets, Crawly.
Well, basically, I didn't sit down and construct like how the story is gonna be, how the world is gonna be, how the world building is gonna be. It basically it is something I pieced together over time. It kind of began with this like mobile game that I've made a few years back now. And that's when I started to kind of construct this like a world, kind of cyberpunkish, but has like a post-apocalyptic setting. But I never really sat down and wrote the characters, wrote the story, wrote how the story is gonna be,
Gotcha.
coming up. But when I started making this game, I added the characters, and I wanted the characters to have a backstory as well, and I've written these notes that you get throughout the game that vaguely explains this. Of course, as you've said, there's the aspect where people may not want to just deal with the story, read the notes or whatever. So the notes are, once you get them, they're unlocked. Unlocked, what am I saying? They're unlocked, and you can read them later in the main menu. So I don't want to force the story to the player, and I didn't want the story to prevent the gameplay in any way. So yeah, you can basically skim through decisions if you want, and just focus on the gameplay, the card combat and stuff. But yeah, I still don't have the full story constructed, but I have been writing it separately, even if I didn't add much to the game yet. I will be adding them one by one. So yeah, it is a process, I guess, in short.
Awesome. So Eric, finally bringing you in a little bit. So same question, and I'm going to aim it towards your webcomic.
So just kind of like my overall writing.
Yeah, what do you do? I mean,
Process, I guess.
again, putting you in context, because it's been a while since you've talked here. We've let you kind
Yep.
of sit in the cold. So putting you a little bit back in context. So again, you are clearly well, you're an artist, that's evident, but you clearly have a technical focus, which is your actual literal ability to draw, your actual literal ability to, play music, to sing, to play an instrument. These are technical skills. These are things that you can sit down and you can get better at them. And we can have the argument until we're blue in the face as to what, how people's floors and ceilings are different or whatever. Um, and that's fair and true. But my question goes more into, okay, so what about the more subjective side of it, the more pure artistic process of it? Like, again, you can be an excellent artist, you can draw real great characters, for example, or excellent backgrounds. That doesn't make you a good writer, and it doesn't make you on top of that, it doesn't necessarily even make you good at making comics. So all of us, I've noticed, particularly interacting with kind of this indie community, that story repeats over and over again. Look at, for example, Crawly's case. He will be the first to tell you he doesn't have a background in writing, for example, and or a background in game design. And yet he's made a pretty badass game that's on Steam right now, and he has written a story and a world to it, and it has some clear lore to it. In your case, you are a badass artist, but you're also working on a webcomic. You've also released, a bunch of different songs. Uh, so what is that? How do you kind of aboard that process that you can't just sit down and watch YouTube tutorials to get better at? Like, I can read 20 programming books and I can become a really badass software engineer. I can get 10 degrees in it and I can become really good at software engineering, but it doesn't make me a good game designer. So how do you kind of approach that aspect to it from your point of view as somebody who has the technical skills? You can draw, it's not in question. Uh, but how do you get good at making comics in your case, which is the project that you're kind of uh, you know talked about when we were doing the 2020 in retrospective stream?
Right. I guess the thing with comics, and if you're out there, when I say comics, I do include any area you are in with comics. Like if you're in Japan, if you like manga or whatever you call it in your area, basically telling a story through pictures, through art. And that's kind of the main focus is the term we like to use is sequential art. So you're trying to tell a story visually more than just through the writing, like through the actual dialogue. So a lot of it is very much a show don't tell kind of thing, which I think people getting into comics need to get a grasp of, which is hard to necessarily teach without first teaching the concept of visual cues and visual storytelling. And that was something I had to kind of get used to getting into comics. Because, of course, you have your dialogue, you have your narrations and stuff like that. But in like the prime days of even like Marvel comics, back in the day when it was basically I almost said Jim Lee, Stan Lee, and Jack Kirby, John Romita, John Buscema, all these guys, when Marvel was really hitting its mark, the way that they put out comics was Stan Lee would give his artists a plot outline, like just a very simple paragraph worth of just, here's what I want the story to be this week. And then he basically would just tell his artist, all right, go. And they would draw the story. And by the end of it, he would then come in and him and his writers would come in and just add the dialogue. So effectively, the artists during that time were telling a lot of the stories through the visuals and through how the characters' faces were looking and how their bodies moved and the actions they took. So no matter how good of like, let's say you're a good writer, you're good at dialogue, but you want to make a comic. Well, can you tell a story without a single line of dialogue? If you can do that, then you can pretty much make a pretty well-designed comic book, and that was something I had to kind of get used to. Like, obviously, I still want to use dialogue, but I guess with like my process and learning, I kind of just sat and read a lot of my favorite comic books, and instead of just paying attention to the story itself, I started paying attention to how the art was telling the story. Uh, Even with like video game, you could say a lot of it because it's so interactive. It's a very visual thing. You can tell a story without a single line of dialogue or any narration, just by what you're seeing, what you're doing. I think it's pretty obvious to most people that, someone's pointing a gun at another person. You can infer that this person's trying to hurt this other person. Their facial expressions might show that they're angry. The other one has a very scared or terrified look on their face, or maybe they're very calm. And so you're like putting the pieces in your mind together. But that's kind of, and I guess even with my writing process, before I even draw anything, and this is only for comic book stuff. My writing process for music is is very different. But for comics, the first thing I came up with for the comic I'm currently actually currently doing a lot of character design stuff was I kind of had I start with an idea. Just a very simple, if I wrote it out, it would maybe fill up a sticky note kind of idea.
Mhm.
And that becomes your center, your core. Like everything that comes from the story has to be about the core of the story, about the core of what you're trying to tell. And you can see that in any comic out there that you look. There's always a center to the story. There's always a center piece or theme or mood or thing that they're trying to tell. And then everything else has to be built around that. And I kind of follow that same suit. I think a lot of us, even if our processes are a little different, the overall general way of telling a story is roughly the same because we all have that thing we're trying to say with our stories.
Yep.
Like for my story, it's not even going to be a complete like front to back kind of story where it's like I'm telling an overarching story. I want to tell a lot of, I guess, like if you were to categorize it, you like in Japan and anime, like slice of life, where it's like you're not just telling a overarching story half the time. Sometimes you might have a chapter where it's just that day of those characters, what they're doing that day and what happens that day, and so the next chapter has nothing to do with the previous one. It might just be a completely different thing.
Yeah. So I guess
But
let me stop you there real quick because a slice of life
yeah,
is an interesting reference because a lot of, or at least some of them, I'm not going to say a lot of them, what I've seen when they do sit downs with the authors and whatever, they a lot of them grab a lot of inspiration from things that they lived in their daily life. There's a reason why a lot of these, well, besides the obvious marketing appeal, but there's a reason a lot of these tend to feature young adults, like teenagers in late high school, or maybe like right about to graduate. It's because it's a time that all these artists and all these authors have kind of passed through themselves. So they're kind of dragging through life experience and kind of putting that in there. And those like daily life episodes, they can do that quite easily there because you don't necessarily have to tell, as you say, a long-term story with just that particular element. It could just be something funny that similarly happened to the author themselves. So again, a lot of the like sequential art and that kind of stuff, a lot of these are good techniques and important to learn. But I guess I'd like to focus a little bit more on you are writing a story and you took I think a common theme that I'm seeing here with Crawly and yourself, and of course myself, is you take obvious inspiration from things that you've read. You take inspiration from things that you like more than anything. A professor of mine once said that if you think you're going to make a completely 100% original game, you're probably fooling yourself. There is a very, very small percentage of people who are even able to do that. And the reality is what you're going to do is you're probably going to take a lot of stuff that you like, you're going to put them together, maybe you're going to add like a small pinch of something new, and that's how new stuff is created. It's really an iteration of past things that have already been created. So in the spirit of all this, I guess my question for you in particular is, you have a story in your mind right now that you are trying to transmit into a webcomic, uh, with all the different techniques and all the things that are important to it. And there's ways of learning to write coherent dialogue or dialogue that makes sense. This is something that can be taught. But my question is, how did you come up with that story in particular? How did you put that together? Even if the story is not necessarily done, but that thing that you have in your head that you want to draw bi-weekly, as we've talked about in the past, or kind of put out full chapters rather than just pages. That story that you have in your head, how did you come up with that? How did you refine it? How do you iterate over it?
Basically, what happens is because like one of my favorite things to read back when I was a kid and watch were a lot of like superhero stuff. I loved Batman the animated series. I loved Justice League the animated series. I read some of the comics. Even when I got into like anime and manga, I started out with a lot of the action oriented stuff. Dragon Ball is still my favorite series of all time. um, but one of the things I kept kind of going in my head was it'd be interesting to tell a story where each episode is just you pick a hero, let's go through a day in their life. Not just the big hero-y stuff they're doing. Sure, you can show that, but what about everything else they're doing? The stuff that if you went to
What do
DC and you
they?
picked up a Batman comic, if you're reading a Batman comic, you want to see what the detective stuff he's doing usually. But I'm like, yeah, but what does he do? Like, what a boring day. Like, give me a boring day when he's doing his runs and like nothing's happening really. Like he maybe stops a mugger. I want to see that kind of day that we can all relate with. Because that's what I wanted. I wanted to take these bigger than life characters and then bring them back down to something that you or I can easily relate to. The daily grind of your job and getting to work on time and dealing with your coworkers and stuff like that. Like you going to the store to get something, like I always love that idea. And so especially thanks to like Japanese comics and anime, things like My Hero Academia and stuff, kind of gave me the idea of like, yeah, instead of just one, and I also didn't want to focus on one character. I wanted to focus on a
So,
bunch of
so I
characters.
guess it's fair to say that it comes not just from the influence of things that you enjoy, but also what you wish they did and they don't necessarily do, or that they don't
Yeah,
do enough, or that you'd like to see more of.
yeah,
Okay, I
kind of
think that's
something I
that's
was
fair.
just like always interested in.
Okay. So, okay, awesome. So, I guess it's a really interesting topic to me, and it's something that I've kind of been trying to evolve how I do things because I've always been very mechanically oriented. I like I think of a core main game mechanic, and then everything else has to kind of fit around that because I've always been very what's the game mechanic, and I've been trying to kind of change the way I personally do things into what's the theme, what feeling am I trying to transmit, and when you think about that, it kind of changes your perspective a little bit on certain things. Like, um, you look at kind of all the games you've enjoyed mechanically and all that, and you ask yourself, okay, why? Because in the end, the important thing of game design is that through mechanics, we're trying to transmit something. A mechanic is nothing but just little numbers and bips and bops if it's not really transmitting something in any game, from an RTS, resource management and army management, all the way to a card game with deck building and risk assessments and stuff like that. Uh, all this is trying to transmit something that will evoke a response, some kind of emotion, the pleasure of having control or of watching a plan play out. All these things are there in game design, and it's something that I think sometimes gets lost in the sauce. I don't know if you guys think that's fair, but sometimes a lot of something I see and that I've done myself is, oh, I like this mechanic. I want to do this because I really liked it in this other game, but maybe I didn't understand why I liked it in that other game. So I really like to pause and kind of ask myself that question, why do I care about this? And I like to kind of do that in my own games now. And it's, at least I feel it's helped me kind of move a little bit forward. Um, and interestingly enough, we did an experiment, me and Elenka, my missus, we did a little bit of an experiment with the Global Game Jam, and we decided we're going to make a game where the actual combat mechanics and actual encounter mechanics are going to be almost a visual novel. It's going to almost be to the point that there's not a lot of action. It's just a lot of dialogue on screen, and it's just a lot of selecting. You have you reach a river. How do you cross it? That kind of stuff. And you're given certain options, and those options evolve as you make more decisions. And we kind of wanted to do that mostly to kind of test this out, and mostly to kind of go a little bit away from the purely mechanical stuff that, at least in my case, we sometimes do. I'm going to play it in the background while everybody kind of weighs in a little bit on this thought. Do you guys what do you first off? What do you think about what I just said? Is that like fair? Do you guys think that sometimes others, and I apply this to myself. I do this, but you think that this is something that sometimes happens in design, where some people are kind of like, I like this, I'm going to repeat this, but they don't really understand why they liked it. And if you don't understand why you like something, like the in-depth reasoning, what comes later isn't as special or isn't as interesting, and it feels like it's missing something. Has that ever happened to you guys? Have you ever seen something like that? Is it something that you think is a real element? What do you guys think of it? I guess is what I'm asking.
I mean, yeah, it's definitely a real thing. In fact, even just taking like myself out of the equation, you can see it in a lot of games that you see that don't do that well, even though what they're basically trying to do is they're trying to pull elements from other games they played. Let's take almost any game that came out after Breath of the Wild that wanted to basically be Breath of the Wild, but didn't understand why people liked Breath of the Wild. And it's the same thing. They got all of the main mechanics down, but they clearly didn't understand what actually made the game fun and what made people really want to keep playing over and over again. And I feel like a few games have grabbed that concept and actually kind of figured it out, and we're like, oh, this is why we like this. But I think even with me in comics, with anyone in game development and stuff, there's always that, like, you see a thing, you like it, you want to try to recreate some part of it, but then you're like, why does it feel like something's missing? And so you go on this like adventure to try and figure out, why do I like this? What about it is catching me? I think we can all agree that we've all felt that at least once in our creative aspects.
Yeah, yeah. So, what about you, Crawley?
Yeah.
What do you think? Let's bring you back into this too.
Well, yeah, of course, I can like think of so many examples. I think it's just part of the process, I guess. Like you gotta take something and try to just see if you can like recreate something with maybe a different flavor. I don't know, but yeah, sometimes you can't get it right, and it doesn't feel right. Yeah, I think it's not natural. It's a normal thing, It's just
Yeah, yeah.
you
I mean,
avoid it.
yeah. So, yeah, it's something that certainly happened to me, uh, and it's something that I think is uh, so yeah, I think it's something that kind of everybody has to go through at one point or another, and when that happens is kind of dependent on each individual. Uh, so yeah, it's something I kind of wanted to include in my own development a little bit more and kind of think about it a little bit more. And it's something I've been doing for a while, and it's paid dividends for me. So yeah, that was my global game jam game for anybody who's actually watching the footage. If you want to give it a shot, it's already in the description right now, so anybody can go and take it a good play. Didn't really bring it to kind of analyze it or anything, but just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about that part of the process and how it can be challenging. And I guess the last part of this, before we kind of call it a wrap, it's gone a little longer than I wanted. Um, is what do you guys do when this conflicts a little bit? And what do I mean by that? Let's say that you have a mechanic you really like, or something that you really wanted to include in the game. I'm very keen to listen to Crawly's point of view, because a card game, or a game with card game elements, is usually not bundled together with horror. I mean, maybe you can think of Call of Cthulhu, the living card game, kind of tries to do that, but these are things that tend to not mix. And in your case, you've made them mix quite well. So, what do you do in that moment when, I guess, the feeling you're trying to transmit, the subjective side of things, be it the writing, be it the theme, be it whatever, conflicts a little bit with maybe the mechanical aspect of it? And you can translate this into art. For example, let's assume that it's the same thing. You're trying to make like a horror uh, manga or whatever, and that requires a certain specific subset of skills. But let's assume you're more of a cartoony, happy, dry kind of guy. Like, what do you do? Uh, how do you make these things work? I guess would be the question that I'm putting out there. Let's start this with Crawly. Let's bring in Eric, and I'll give my thoughts at the end.
Um, I guess when you think that card games, you know, when you think them together, card games and horror, it kind of sounds like they won't mix together. But I feel like they're a bit like in like different frequencies, basically. Um, so I feel like we have an idea that feel like it won't like go together or work. I guess just trying it and seeing for yourself is the best idea most of the time. No, like first time I've thought of this idea as well. Like I'm thinking like, will it work? Like a horror game, survivaler, like nothing to do with cards. But then like there are also games that are like kind of survivalery, like Darkest Dungeon, and they have RPG elements, turn-based combat. So um, you can like card games are generally turn-based combat. So um, they can be together maybe. And I've tried it out, and of course. Some people might think it mixed together as well, but as I've said, I think of them more in like different frequencies that just cater to, or that affect different things. Um, the card gameplay is the fun aspect basically, and the horror game or survival part of it is more like emotional or affecting you emotionally. Like it's making you like um, feel danger or feel more stress maybe in certain parts.
Well, I mean, I
Um,
would argue that in your game, the card mechanics do also feed back into it and add back into it. An example how you flee the game, or at least how you used to flee. I don't know if that's changed since then, and how that is a card that's put into your deck, and you have to kind of wait for it in order to execute it. And that certainly it makes you feel that panic of, oh gosh, I want to escape, but I can't, or the hoping that you get the right weapon in order to get rid of this horrible banshee thing that wants to rip your face off. I'd argue that the card you've made the card aspect of it feed quite well into the theme. So
yeah,
I
of course, like
yeah.
survivors, they do have certain like gameplay elements.
Hmm.
So I think it's the big thing is to be able to kind of bridge them together, bridge card games and horror games in some way. Find a way to do that, and um, it works out. I think.
So I think a good way to um, I guess would it be fair for me to summarize a lot of what you at least initially said as don't allow yourself to be bogged down or defined by what is conventionally true. Like it's a convention that card
Yeah,
games don't mix well with horror. Well, don't listen to that. Would be uh, part of your advice. Is that fair? Is that a fair one line summation of what you just said?
exactly. That's a yeah, very good summary, of course.
Okay. So awesome. And once again, I guess your game is evidence that this is a valid position because it mixed quite well, at least in my opinion. These two elements that otherwise some people would say shouldn't mix. What about you,
Of
Eric?
course,
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I want one thing. It
Yeah.
doesn't change the fact that it's like it's a niche thing. Like, of course, there's gonna be people that's gonna think um, like what is this or something like that.
Well,
But
everything is niche until it becomes trendy.
yeah,
So, and then when it stops being trendy, it goes back to being niche. So,
so yeah,
yeah,
I don't think it's possible to like make like a very generalized thing. So yeah, you have to think um, like you have to keep in mind that something worked together doesn't mean everybody will like it. You know.
exactly. Yeah. That's some wise words right there. Remember that not everybody is going to necessarily like your art. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's wrong or not art. So on that artistic line, uh, what are your thoughts, Eric?
I mean, yeah, it's one of those things where like whether it's considered a convention thing or it's like, oh, these two probably won't work together. It's one of those things where it's never really been that much of a concern for me, just because I feel that there is no real limits to what you can do in your head, like what you can think of, the ideas you can come up with, and the only real limitations are: do you have the technology to do it, and do you have the will to try and see it through if you really want to try something. But at the same time, you gotta try it to know if it's even gonna work. You know, if you don't even give it a chance, then how do you know that? Like in Crawly's case, like you would have never known how well the card game thing and the horror thing work together until he just did it. um, and
Just
it's the
do it,
same with
boys and
comics. You
girls.
know,
Just do it.
like you, yeah, just do it. And even like what you brought up earlier when you said like the whole like, oh, you're trying to tell a horror story, but you're only good at making like super cutesy comic book stuff. And it's like, then just do a really cutesy horror. Like just use the cutesy style to influence the horror and make the
Yeah,
horror, whether you want
exactly.
to make it a comedy horror or whether you want it to intensify the horror by making it so that there's that juxtaposition of, oh, look at all these cutesy things, and then there's some terrible crap happening, and it confuses the audience in a horrible way because they're like, wait, this
Subvert
is
the
really
convention.
cute
Yeah.
drawing, but what's going on here? Yes, subversion. Like, but you can also do the other subversion where it's a horror theme, but you have this goofy character who just sees everything as like normal or fun or, you know, like Adam's Family. A lot of horrible things going on, and a lot of horrible things they do to each other, but they're this loving family that cares for each other and they find everything fun. Even when they're talking about beheading someone, they're like, oh, that goofy person. Like, they're freaking two kids are trying to kill each other half the time, and they're just like, oh, those kids. Like, it's one of those things where you just got to try it and see how it works. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't.
Kind of piggybacking off that, I think that old saying that limitation creates innovation, and that we could see it in the gaming industry. You could see it with the Game Boy, and we can with these lesser systems that
Oh
they had
yeah.
to do so much with so little. In fact, to the point that a lot of people argue, partially because of nostalgia, of course, but uh, also partially because it's probably true in a lot of cases that a lot of AAA games of today, with all their graphics and all their bells and whistles and 20 years of conventions to build off of, a lot of them can't compete with these older games that were, quite frankly, the graphics engine they were using was your imagination because half of it was text. So
Yep.
I think it's the limitation creates innovation. We should also apply it to if your mechanics are clashing. It's kind of what Eric just demoed for us a little bit. Hey, you have a really cutesy art style and you want to make something horror, subvert people. Make some very beautiful scenes that are kind of fucked up in the sense that you don't have to draw anything like super messed up. Just the context of the scene is everything. Off the top of my head, like a very cute funeral. Like that's something that would immediately, make you feel uncomfortable. And I guess when I think about these two things contradicting each other, because it's happened to me a lot. I love designing mechanics. I love thinking up these kind of things, and there's millions of little demos I've made for myself. Um, and uh, something I've noticed is that when you have a contradiction between these two things that you want to put together, I think a good step to take, even if I agree that you should always kind of, go with your gut and try it out, because just because a convention is there doesn't mean it's true. But something you should also do, in my opinion, is look at, okay, why do I like this mechanic? What am I trying to transmit? Why did I get enjoyment of it when I played it or something similar in this other stuff? And why am I trying to put this theme in? And more often than not, you'll find that maybe your answer to either of those questions might change things a little bit, or they might make you rethink things. If you're just trying to smash two things together because you think they'd look cool and no other reason, and there's no deep process in it, you're going to find these roadblocks. And again, you can still do it, of course, but I always think it's good to kind of sit down and ask yourself, like, okay, why? And uh, okay, how do I want to transmit this? Why do I want to transmit this? And in the end, the theme and the mechanics shouldn't be two things that are kind of walking, in parallel, maybe, but in different streets. They should be things that feed back into each other. They should be things that go hand in hand, that makes sense, that feels natural. If it feels like, oh, here's the story, and then there's this other thing, which are the mechanics, uh, it might not feel I guess it might feel jarring to the uh, consumer of the media.
I think it's something that a very, very influential comic book artist said once, and I think you can apply this to a lot of things, really, is while he was teaching people how to draw comics, one of the things he was teaching when he was talking about anatomy and proportions is if it looks wrong, then it's wrong. And that is a completely subjective thing. If it looks wrong to you, if it feels wrong to you,
It's
then
wrong.
that's all you need to know. It's wrong.
Yep. Yeah. And keep in mind that feedback, external feedback, is also important whenever you're doing something, but you should be the ultimate arbiter in the end.
Yeah.
Again, you're making media that you create that nobody consumes isn't really media. Art that you create that nobody can presence or use or care, I mean, is it even art? It's kind of like if a tree falls in the woods kind of thing. But at the same time, you also have to be kind of true to the artistic integrity that you wanted to put into it, to the vision that you originally had. You have to kind of be true to that. So it's a delicate balancing act in that regard. But yeah, I think that wraps things up, boys and girls. So let's give me your final thoughts, Crawly, Eric, and we will send this one home.
Well, final thoughts. Just do what you like, guys. When you, yeah, there is the aspect that when you mix things together, you're basically taking like subsets of things, like you're combining them, and that makes, I guess, your audience or your players or whatever you're gonna do, people who will judge that and respond positively, you're basically taking a subset of that as well. Like you're making a cute game that's horror. Then you're putting like, I don't know, anime girls in it. Then you're like eliminating people that don't like anime, and then you're putting I don't know. Like you're basically you need to think, like you need to select if you want to like optimize your player base, or you want to just go for something remixed, something take like find something in it that's new and try to make people like it, or you're just going to be safe and repeat something that's been done before. So I feel like always experimenting and trying out new things, adding something you like to the things, um, results in something better. And if you can manage to make other people like it as well, then I think it will be a bigger accomplishment. So yeah, just do what you like, I guess.
So I guess the to sum up a couple of Crawly's important new points that were particularly interesting to me. Keep in mind that when, like for example, his example of a cute game and a horror game, keep in mind that a lot of things already have expectations attached to them. So if you're going to combine two things that might have completely separate expectations, understand what you're doing and you know, do it. Do what you want, as Crawly says. Do what you want, Crawly 2021. Um, but also keep that in mind that there are expectations, and if you want to subvert those expectations, if you want to change them on the offset, keep in mind that those expectations exist. Is that a fair summary of the new point that you brought in there, Crawly?
Yes.
Okay. So Eric, what about you?
Um, I think I can say it pretty simply as at least a thing that I go by is do what you love, and more importantly, have fun. Like, I think that's something a lot of us tend to forget when we get into the grind and we get into like the expectations and what we're trying to do, especially because for some of us it is a source of income.
Hmm.
But I think the most important thing that a lot of us in the creative community really need to remember is you're supposed to have fun doing it. And if you're not enjoying the process, even the hardships of the process, if you're not enjoying it, then there's no worth there. You're not going to create the best thing that you can create. So a lot of it does come down to just remembering you're doing this to have fun and do what you love. So, and sometimes that thought alone can help you get through the really tough moments, like the ones that you do dread and are the hardest part that you may not enjoy as much, but because you love creating, that helps you get through it.
I was going to say something, but I think I'd like to end on that. That's a nice little ending one. So I'll keep mine. Thank you everybody for joining. Once again, this is a Game Dev Roundtable. These were Eric and Crawly. Again, Eric, you can check out all his links, excuse me, in the description, as well as Crawly's
Yeah,
game
all
and
their
Discord.
Eric, all their link. We
All
are
their
many, we are legion.
Oh, I'm tired. So yeah, you can check out all our stuff in the description. You could check out the Game Jam game that I made in the description as well, and you can join the Discord. Most important thing in the description as well. Thank you, everybody. Say goodbye, boys.
Bye.
Bye.
Again, you missed the opportunity to say goodbye, boys.